Welcome back to another episode of Break the Silence. I am your host, Cyborg. Thanks for clicking on the video. Thank you to all of your mothers for clicking on the video as well. We just got done watching the San Antonio Spurs advance to the Western Conference semifinals, taking down the Portland Trail Blazers in 5 games. Tonight they won 114-95. I think this series was so valuable for the Spurs team and the run they could potentially go on, and we're going to discuss that all here in a few seconds, as well as why I am absolutely desperate for the Spurs to come out of the Western Conference. When you look at the playing field that's left, I so badly want the Spurs to be the team that makes the NBA Finals and makes that jump and see Victor Wembanyama and all these great young Spurs players in the NBA Finals this season. Before we get into it, make sure you take a second to subscribe to the channel. We're on the road to 1,500 subscribers, so if you love the NBA, make sure you take a second to subscribe. So tonight, the Spurs had 6 players scoring double figures. No one in particular had a monstrous game, but they all performed at a really high level. DeAaron Fox had 21. Wemby had 17, 14, and 6 blocks, doing what he does. Champagnie gave you 16 and 7. Devin Vassell had 10 points. Stephon Castle had 15. And Dylan Harper off the bench had 17 points. This team has played so well as a collective unit. Victor Wembanyama, we know, went down with a concussion in Game 2. And for the series, I'm only counting the 3 games he played in because in Game 2, his stats really, he didn't play a whole lot in that game, so I don't think it's fair to include that. But in those 3 games, he averaged 26.3 points, 10.3 rebounds, and 5 blocks per game. So he played at a super high level. But what we saw is when Wemby went out, other guys stepped up. And I think that is what's so key when you're talking about what this Spurs team can accomplish this season. We know what Victor Wembanyama represents. We know that he is arguably the best player on the planet right now in his 3rd season in the NBA, in his first postseason. What we want to see is him prove that in the playoffs. But with the way that he talks, the way that he handles himself, the way that he conducts himself, and the way that he has trained for these moments his entire life, seemingly, we believe that Victor Wembanyama will perform in the biggest spots, in the biggest moments. But how will these other young guys around him? And the Spurs have a lot of blue chippers. Stephon Castle, DeAaron Fox, Dylan Harper. A lot of guys who we saw huge playoff games, especially when Wemby was out in Game 3. We saw Stephon Castle give you 33 points and Dylan Harper have 27 and 10. Luke Cornett, backing up Victor Wembanyama, gave you 14 and 10 in that series, and I think that that's really valuable. We saw all year that the Spurs, when Luke Cornett or Wemby were on the court, were almost unbeatable, and when those 2 guys were off the court, they really struggled. And I think it's partially when you're the guards on the Spurs team, you can be a little more aggressive on the defensive end of the court when you know you have one of these 7-footers behind you that will protect the paint. But when one of those guys are out, it's significantly different in the way that you got to play basketball. So the San Antonio, let me say this. The San Antonio Spurs won the NBA Finals the year I was born in 1999. The NBA feels right and so much better when the Spurs are a great basketball team because they've been a great organization and really, really elite for almost my entire life. They had a few down years post-Kawhi, DeMar DeRozan, LaMarcus Aldridge, whatever. And then you started to rebuild. You get Wemby, you get Castle, you get Dylan Harper, you trade for De'Aaron Fox. Keldon Johnson just won Most Improved Player. But it just feels right when the San Antonio Spurs are one of the best organizations in the NBA. And it looks like they're right back there really quickly. They also do a great job with their coaches, I think. Obviously, we know Greg Popovich is arguably the greatest coach of all time. And Mitch Johnson seems to be doing an excellent job in Season 1 with this Spurs team. But the question mark was, how will this team perform? Well, I have 2 questions. How do they perform without Wemby on the court? Are they able to continue to keep up that level of success? Because we know in the regular season, Wemby's plus-minus was unbelievable. And he's a guy that doesn't play super heavy minutes. He averaged 28 minutes a game. I guess that's counting the game that he didn't play the full amount of time. Tonight he gave you 34 minutes, but in the regular season he only played about 29, 30 minutes a game. So will he be able to ramp it up if they needed him in the second or third rounds to play 40, 45 minutes? That is a question mark. But how will the rest of the roster perform when Wemby is on the bench. My other question mark that we did not get answered in this series, but I think will absolutely happen in round 2, is in crunch time in the playoffs, who will take the shots, who will dribble the ball up the court, who will put the Spurs in their offense. Will we see DeAaron Fox do that? Will we see Wemby taking the basketball and taking charge in those moments a little bit more? All those things are kind of up in the air, but when you look right now at the rest of really the NBA in general, obviously we know the Nuggets and Timberwolves seem to be in a dogfight of a series. If the Timberwolves advance, they likely won't have Anthony Edwards and won't have Dante DiVincenzo. And if the Nuggets advance, Aaron Gordon is hurt, Peyton Watson is hurt, and the Nuggets are just not playing very good basketball. So it looks like the path that I thought was going to be a little more difficult for the Spurs, having to play a Nuggets team in round 2 that I thought was going to be really good, just really cleared up, especially with those injuries. And the Spurs should fairly easily make it to the Western Conference Finals if that stays the way it is. What's waiting for you there will likely be an Oklahoma City Thunder team that probably swept the first 2 rounds, because we know that the Lakers are not actually that good. They'll take down a sorry Rockets team, but the Lakers are not actually that good, and the Thunder will probably beat them in 4 games, maybe 5, but it sounds like Luka's not even playing. So going into the Western Conference Finals, you're going to have 2 teams that are very, very rested. And what I would love for the Spurs to have happen is in 1 or 2 of these games in the second round, have a tight, close game where they just get to practice that playoff pressure late game offense. I'm not at all saying that they can't do it. I just think getting valuable reps before you get to Oklahoma City will prove to be very valuable, in my opinion. We know the Spurs offense this postseason so far is number 4 in the league in offensive rating, number 2 in defensive rating, and they're number 1 in three-point percentage. If they continue to shoot the basketball at this level from the three-point line, I don't see any way that any team beats them. And then on the other end of the bracket, the Eastern Conference looks like a mess. The 1 seed is down 3-1 to the Magic. The Celtics just lost to the 76ers for a second time. The Knicks are in a dogfight with the Hawks 3-2. And then the Cavs Raptors are in a 2-2 series. So if you're looking at this, it feels like the NBA Finals and who's going to win the championship will come down to that Western Conference Finals between the Thunder and the Spurs. And the experience the Spurs were able to gain in this series against the Portland Trail Blazers, I think, will be very valuable. And let me say this for a second. Congratulations on a great season to the Portland Trail Blazers. The fact that they were able to get the 7 seed after losing your coach right before the season because of, some questionable off-the-court decisions, we'll say, allegedly. The fact that they were still able to get the 7 seed, Denny Avdia, the way that he played, and some of their other guys who made real steps forward this season, that is an awesome season for the Trailblazers, and they're really doing a great job building. You maybe get Dame back next year, and use some of those assets to continue building out your roster. Can Scoot Henderson take a step forward? We'll see with the Portland Trailblazers, but this is a good win, and the Spurs dismantled them fairly easily, even in the game that they lost. The Spurs were up, I believe, by 14 points late in that game, and we know Wemby went out with that injury, and they kind of blew it late there. But that's okay. You don't mind in any 7-game series, losing 1 game is not that big of a deal. But we see for the series, DeAaron Fox averaged 20 points. We know, like I said, Wemby averaged 26. Stephon Castle gave you 20. Vassell 13. Dylan Harper had 2 monster games and 2 little lesser games. He had 13 points per game. Champagnie had 10. Luke Cornett averaged 8 points per game. Keldon Johnson 6 points a game. The Spurs are able to go 8-9 guys deep, because that's not even mentioning Carter Bryant and Harrison Barnes, who can still play minutes for this roster. So the Spurs have great depth. They have great high-end talent. And because of all those ball handlers, we really see, if you want to see the opposite of the Spurs, go watch the Detroit Pistons. And the fact that they have one single guy that can create offense is such a disaster. Cade Cunningham has done everything he can. He's turning the ball over at a high clip because he has to do everything for that offense. When you look at the Spurs, having all those point guards, De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper, being able to generate offense and get their guys in their spots and get shots for themselves is so valuable. And you don't always see it in the regular season, but in the playoffs, it really, really stands out. So being able to get Wemby the ball in his spots, and we know Wemby can generate a shot for himself as well, but having a point guard that can kind of take some of the pressure off you and help you out in those situations is really valuable. Victor Wembanyama, I cannot wait. If he wins an NBA championship, I cannot wait to have conversations about where he stands in the history of the league as far as players this early in their career. I respect the opinion of a lot of people that have said that Wemby's the greatest defensive player they've ever seen. Obviously, we know, looking back, guys like Tim Duncan, I'm wearing his jersey right now, Hakeem Olajuwon, Dennis Rodman's of the world, Scottie Pippen's of the world, Bill Russell is a guy we didn't really, most of us didn't get to see, but we know that defensively he's highly regarded. So the fact that Wemby is already in conversations for the greatest defensive player of all time is really unbelievable. But if the offense continues to roll the way that they are, and they're number 1 in the NBA in three-point shooting and number 4 in offensive rating, if they're able to continue to roll, I just don't really see how any team can compete. Obviously, we know the Oklahoma City Thunder are a force to be reckoned with. They're a team that plays really a sickening brand of basketball. Let me give you this disclaimer real quick. I started this podcast significantly because I didn't like the way that the modern NBA was discussed. I think it was very negative constantly. The way the old heads talk about the NBA, the way that a lot of older voices in NBA media talk about the sport is very negative. But the Oklahoma City Thunder are borderline unwatchable to me. So I'm really just hoping the Spurs are able to advance to the NBA Finals so I can just watch the finals and enjoy it. Because whoever the Spurs play, I don't care. I would just enjoy watching that brand of basketball because I think the Spurs play the right way and the way that they compete at a high level and do so many things well. I just really hope the Spurs are able to take down the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I don't generally have rooting interest, but in this case, I'm making an exception. I don't like the way that they are discussed. I don't like the Oklahoma City Thunder. I don't like the way they're discussed. And I just don't like the way that they play basketball because they're so talented they could play it the correct way. But all in all, we want to focus on the Spurs, what they were able to accomplish tonight. The great season that the Trailblazers had. Congrats to the San Antonio Spurs for advancing to the second round where they will be playing the winner of the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Denver Nuggets. We will see that series 3-2 right now, but the Timberwolves have all those injuries, so the Nuggets we would kind of expect to advance, but it seems like they're going to be pretty banged up as well. Let me know, do you think the Spurs are going to advance to the NBA Finals this season, and did you like what you saw in this first round series against the Trailblazers? That's all we got for you tonight. Again, if you love NBA, don't forget to subscribe. Saborgawa.